Jasmine stepped into the school gates quietly, her backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder. It was old, faded, and patched at the corners. Her shoes were scuffed, and her clothes were simple, not brand new, not stylish, just clean. She looked around, her brown eyes full of nerves but calm. This was her first day in a new school, in a new city, and she knew nobody here. The school hallway was loud. Students were laughing, talking, slamming lockers. Music played from someone's speaker. A basketball bounced in the distance. Jasmine kept walking with her head slightly lowered. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to survive the day without trouble, but attention came anyway. A group of girls noticed her immediately. They were loud, pretty, and dressed in the latest fashion. One of them, a tall girl with shiny nails and expensive earrings, whispered something and they all laughed. Jasmine heard it. She always heard everything, even when people thought she didn't. She looked like she'd time-traveled from the 90s. One of the girls said with a smirk. They all laughed again. Jasmine didn't react. She kept walking. But something inside her tightened. She had felt this before in other places, in other schools. Being the quiet girl always made her a target. In her first class, the teacher smiled and asked her to introduce herself. Jasmine stood up slowly. "Hi, I'm Jasmine," she said softly. "I just moved here." That was it. No long speech, no jokes, no nervous rambling. She sat down as quickly as she had stood up. The class went on, but eyes kept turning toward her, and whispers started by lunch break. Most of the students knew about the new girl. In the cafeteria, Jasmine stood at the end of the food line, her stomach rumbling. She hadn't eaten much since yesterday. Her uncle worked night shifts and money was tight. Sometimes food came from discount bins, but she never complained. She picked the cheapest items, some rice, beans, and a bottle of water, and walked to an empty table. But before she could sit, someone bumped into her hard. Her tray flipped, food fell everywhere, beans spilled across the floor, and her water bottle rolled under the table. Everyone turned to look. A few kids laughed. Phones came out. Someone even recorded it. Jasmine froze for a second, her hands still holding the empty tray. Her shirt now had rice on it, and her shoes were wet. The girl who bumped into her was one of the bullies from earlier. She looked down at Jasmine and said, "Oops, didn't see you," then walked away smiling. The laughter grew louder, but Jasmine said nothing. She bent down, picked up the mess quietly, grabbed some napkins, and cleaned the floor. She found her bottle under a table, wiped it off, and threw the rest in the trash. Then she left the cafeteria without eating a bite. Some students watched in silence, unsure what to do. A few looked uncomfortable, but no one helped her. No one stood up for her, not even the teachers. Nearby, outside, Jasmine sat alone under a tree, her stomach still empty, but her face calm. She took deep breaths, like her uncle taught her. Breathe in the pain, breathe out the fire. He used to say during training, because Jasmine wasn't just a quiet girl. She was something more, something no one at school knew yet. Every night, after homework and chores, she went to a small boxing gym hidden in an alley. There, under flickering lights and loud music, she trained with old gloves and heavy bags. Her uncle, a former underground fighter, taught her everything he knew. From footwork to jabs to balance and breathing, Jasmine had power in her fists and even more in her will. She had fought tougher opponents in secret matches, dodging punches from girls twice her size. She had bled, cried, fallen, but never quit. But she never told anyone at school, not even teachers, not even friends, because she had none yet. Back under the tree, Jasmine watched the clouds pass slowly. Her fingers clenched and unclenched. She remembered every word the bullies said, every laugh, every look, but she didn't let it break her. Not yet. The school bell rang, and students rushed to their next class. Jasmine stood up, dusted off her pants, and walked back into the building. She didn't walk fast or slow, just steady, as if she carried a secret inside her chest, a storm, waiting for the right time. When she entered the classroom again, the girls giggled at her stained shirt. One boy pointed and chuckled. But Jasmine sat down without saying a word, her hands folded, her eyes focused on the board. The teacher called for attention. But the class stayed noisy. Jasmine kept listening, writing, and ignoring everything else, but deep down, she knew something had changed inside her, not because she was humiliated, but because she had let them think she was weak. And one day they would learn the truth, not through words, but through something else entirely. That day wasn't today, but it was coming. The next few days at school didn't get easier for Jasmine. She kept her head low, did her classwork quietly, and avoided attention. But the bullies didn't forget her. They remembered the way she didn't fight back in the cafeteria. They took her silence as weakness, and weakness was something they liked to play with. Everywhere Jasmine went, she felt the eyes on her. In the hallways, in the bathroom, even during gym class. When she changed into her simple paid clothes, she could hear whispers behind her. She doesn't even have proper shoes. One girl said, "Probably sleeps in them." Another added. But Jasmine kept her hands at her sides, her mouth shut and her eyes straight ahead. Her uncle always told her, "You don't need to answer bullies with words. Just let your actions speak louder." On the fourth day, during lunchtime, things took a turn. Jasmine entered the cafeteria like usual, picked a small plate of food, and walked toward a quiet corner. But this time, the same group of girls who tripped her before were waiting. They smiled sweetly and called her over. Pretending to be friendly, Jasmine stopped, unsure. She knew something was off, but she didn't want more problems, so she walked slowly toward them. They had made room at their table. Patting the seat next to them like she was welcome, Jasmine sat down, her plate still untouched, her stomach already tight with nerves. One of the girls leaned close and said, "We were just wondering, where did you get that backpack? My grandma had one just like it 20 years ago." The girls burst into laughter. Jasmine said nothing. She picked up her spoon and quietly took a bite of rice. They didn't stop there. Another girl reached across and took Jasmine's water bottle, looking at it like it was something dirty. "This thing, is it even clean?" she said, then poured it onto the floor and handed it back, empty. Jasmine's hands tightened on her spoon, but she didn't move. Her knuckles turned white. But she didn't speak. Her uncle's voice echoed in her mind again. "Real strength isn't in the punch. It's in the moment you choose not to throw it." But the final blow came a few minutes later. One of the girls took her phone out, opened the camera, and said, "Say cheese, Jasmine," before Jasmine could look up. The girl snapped a picture of her while she was chewing her food and posted it online with the caption, "Stray cat finally found scraps." Laughter filled the table again, and others nearby began checking their phones. The image was spreading fast. Jasmine stood up slowly, her plate still half full, her face calm but pale. She took her tray, walked to the trash bin, dumped the food quietly, and walked out of the cafeteria. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just walked, step by step, out of the building, down the sidewalk, and straight home. That afternoon, her uncle found her in the backyard, punching the old heavy bag they had hung from a tree branch. Her hands were bare, her knuckles raw, sweat dripping from her brow. Her breathing was heavy and controlled. He didn't say anything at first, just stood and watched, then finally walked over and gently took her wrists. "What happened?" he asked quietly. Jasmine looked up at him, her jaw clenched. "They humiliated me again," she said, "and I let them." Her uncle shook his head slowly. "No, you didn't let them. You chose not to destroy them." Jasmine blinked, confused. "If you had hit one of them, they would have cried and played victim." He said, "You did right, but now It's time we focus your fire. Not to fight for revenge, but to prepare for what comes next. That night, she didn't just train. She exploded. Every jab was sharper, every step lighter, every dodge faster. Her uncle nodded with pride. "That's my girl," he whispered. "You're not just a fighter, you're a storm in silence." Back at school the next day. The teasing continued, but it had changed slightly. The girls now looked a bit confused. Why didn't Jasmine react? Why didn't she cry or tell a teacher? Why was she so calm? Jasmine moved through the halls like a shadow, silent, unshaken. She watched, listened, and waited. One boy who sat behind her in math class whispered during the lesson, "Why don't you say anything? Are you too scared or just too dumb?" Jasmine turned her head slowly, her eyes locking onto his. "No," she said quietly. "I just know when not to waste energy." It was the first time many students had heard her speak, and the cold, steady tone in her voice made some of them shift uncomfortably in their seats. The teacher paused for a moment and looked at Jasmine curiously. Something had changed in her presence, something that couldn't be explained with words. By the end of the week, the school was buzzing with a new question: not, "Why is she so quiet?" but "Who is Jasmine really?" And in one corner of the gym hallway, 3 of the bully girls leaned together, whispering, "We should watch her." One of them said, "She's weird." Another added, "It's like she's hiding something." They were right, but they had no idea what was coming, and soon they'd wish they never pushed her that far. Jasmine sat on the floor of the small garage that had been turned into a boxing gym. The walls were made of old bricks, the ceiling leaked when it rained, and the punching bags were patched and worn. But to Jasmine, this place was more than a gym. It was home. It was where her real strength lived. Her uncle Marcus stood across from her, wrapping tape around her hands with steady fingers. His eyes were serious, but warm. "You're getting faster," he said. "That left hook is almost perfect." Jasmine looked up at him, her face still bruised from a minor fight last weekend. Underground matches didn't have doctors or referees, only rules made by fighters themselves. She had fought a girl twice, her size, and won in the 3rd round, but she didn't smile about it. "She never did. I don't want to fight," Jasmine said quietly. "Not unless I have to." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's why you're dangerous," he said. "You don't fight for pride or show. You fight when it matters." The bell on the door rang as another young fighter walked in. The gym was always half dark, half lit, the smell of sweat and determination in the air. No music played, only the sound of gloves hitting bags, feet sliding on mats, and the occasional groan of someone taking a hard hit. Jasmine walked to the center mat and started her footwork. Light steps, sharp turns, fists up. She wasn't just punching air, she was sharpening her weapon. Her own body, her mind flashed back to school, to the way they laughed at her, to the tray that hit the floor, to the water bottle emptied for fun. Her fists moved faster now, her breathing steady. Every strike was silent anger being released. Marcus watched her carefully. He knew the signs. Jasmine was holding something in again, and if it wasn't released here, it might explode somewhere else. "Tell me what's bothering you," he said without looking away. Jasmine didn't stop moving. They posted another photo. She said, "This time they made a meme. Said I look like I eat out of trash." Marcus sighed deeply. "You want to hurt them?" he asked. Jasmine stopped, sweat on her forehead, fists frozen in the air. "No," she said. "I want them to see who they're really dealing with." That night, after training, Jasmine sat on the gym bench, holding her old phone. She had saved dozens of match videos. None were online. Her uncle had always warned her not to expose herself. "Real fighters don't need likes," he said. "They need respect." But Jasmine had an idea now. The next day at school, she said nothing as usual. But in computer class, she opened a new email, attached a short clip from one of her underground fights, and sent it anonymously to the school's student-run news page. She didn't write her name, didn't explain, just typed the words, "You never know who someone really is." By lunch, the video had spread across the school like fire. In the clip, Jasmine stood in a ring surrounded by shouting adults. Lights swinging overhead. Gloves on, eyes cold. Her opponent charged at her, wild and fast. But Jasmine ducked, stepped aside, and knocked her down with one clean punch. Students stared at the screen in disbelief. That can't be her, some said. She's too quiet. Others argued, it's edited. Someone shouted, but deep inside, many knew it was real. The girls who bullied her the most sat frozen in the cafeteria, the same place where they once made Jasmine cry inside. Now felt like a stage she had flipped over. One of them, Kayla, the loudest one, pulled out her phone and re-watched the clip 3 times, her mouth slightly open, her fingers shaking a little. "That's not possible," she whispered. "She's just a loser," but her voice didn't sound confident anymore. Jasmine sat alone, as always, at her table in the corner, eating slowly, her face calm. She had heard the whispers, seen the stares, but she didn't say a word, not even when a few boys approached her and asked, "Is that really you?" She only looked at them and nodded once, then went back to her meal. That evening, the bullies followed her, not to hurt her, but to spy. They waited across the street and saw her enter the old gym building. They snuck closer and peeked through the broken window in the sidewall. What they saw shocked them. Inside, Jasmine was sparring with her uncle, gloves on, sweat flying with every punch, her eyes focused, her movement sharp. The sound of her gloves hitting his pads echoed like thunder. "This is crazy," one of the girls whispered. She's a real fighter." Another one gulped. "We messed with the wrong girl." They watched in silence as Jasmine knocked the punching mitt out of her uncle's hand and stepped back, breathing hard, powerful, controlled, unstoppable. That night, none of them laughed anymore, and for the first time, fear entered their eyes. Not because she threatened them, but because she never had to. Jasmine didn't want revenge. She wanted them to know the truth, and now they did. But this was just the beginning, because Jasmine wasn't done. She had trained her whole life in silence. Now the world had started to listen, and soon everyone would know who Jasmine really was. After the fight videos spread across school, Jasmine became a mystery to everyone. People stopped laughing at her, but they didn't come close either. Most just stared from a distance, unsure how to act around her now. Some whispered that she was dangerous. Others said she was a legend. But Jasmine didn't care about rumors. She just wanted peace. But peace didn't come. In fact, the silence made some of the bullies angrier. Kayla, the leader of the mean girls, felt her control slipping away. People no longer laughed at her jokes. They watched Jasmine instead. The power had shifted, and Kayla hated it. She believed Jasmine had embarrassed her in front of the whole school. Even though Jasmine never said a word, Kayla decided to do something about it. During science class, while the teacher was writing on the board, Kayla leaned toward Jasmine's backpack under the table and slipped a stolen gold bracelet inside. Then she raised her hand and yelled, "Miss, I think someone stole from my locker." The room went quiet. The teacher turned around with surprise. "Are you sure?" She asked. "Yes," Kayla said quickly, her voice full of fake panic. "My gold bracelet is gone. It was just there during gym." The teacher called the school officer, and a search began when Jasmine's bag was opened. The bracelet was found, sitting right on top. Everyone gasped. Jasmine's eyes widened. She had never seen it before. But before she could say anything, the teacher shook her head sadly. "You're coming with me," the officer said. Jasmine didn't argue. She stood up, calm as always, and followed quietly. The hallway was long, the steps slow, inside her heart. Something began to burn, not from the false blame, but from the way everyone just stared. No one said a word, no one stood up, not even the ones who once cheered for her after the video went viral. In the office, she was told she was suspended for 3 days. No trial, no chance to defend herself. The bracelet had been found in her bag, and that was enough. She nodded, picked up her bag, and walked out of the building. Her uncle waited at home, surprised to see her so early when he heard what happened. He clenched his fists, his voice tight with anger. "Do you want to fight back?" he asked. Jasmine looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "No, not yet." That night, she didn't go to the gym. Instead, she sat outside under the stars. Thinking, her fists rested on her knees, her eyes stared at the sky, and her heart felt heavy. She remembered her mother's voice, soft and kind. "Never let the world tell you who you are, baby, you show them." Her mom had died in a fire when Jasmine was only 8. Saving a child from a burning house, Jasmine never forgot that bravery. It lived inside her now. It shaped the silence she carried. On the second day of suspension, Jasmine returned to the gym. She trained harder than ever. Sweat poured down her face. Her arms shook, her legs burned, but she kept going. Marcus watched silently, his heart proud but hurting too. He knew this wasn't just training anymore. This was release. Meanwhile, at school, something unexpected happened. A shy student named Nina, who had seen Kayla slip the bracelet into Jasmine's bag, started feeling guilty. She hadn't said anything because she was scared. But now, seeing Jasmine gone made her feel sick inside. On the 3rd day, Nina walked into the principal's office and told the truth. She explained everything, even showed a blurry photo she had taken by accident. While texting, it showed Kayla near Jasmine's desk, with her hand reaching down. It was enough. The school called Jasmine back. They apologized. They said it was a misunderstanding. Jasmine listened, nodded, and said thank you, but she didn't smile. She returned to school quietly, went straight to class, and sat down like nothing happened. The students stared again, but this time, some of them felt ashamed. After class, something strange happened. One of the boys from the basketball team stood up and said, "Hey Jasmine, I'm sorry about what happened." A few others murmured agreement, but Jasmine just nodded once and walked away. Later that day, she was putting her books in her locker when she heard loud footsteps behind her. It was Kayla, her face red with anger. "You think you're better than me now?" she hissed. "You think just because you can fight, we're all supposed to bow down?" Jasmine turned around slowly, her face calm, her eyes cold. "I don't think about you at all," she said. Kayla snapped, raised her hand to slap Jasmine. But before it could touch her face, Jasmine caught her wrist in the air, just like that, fast, smooth, controlled. Kayla froze, her eyes wide with shock. "You don't want to do that," Jasmine said softly, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. The hallway was empty, silent. No one saw, no one heard. But the message was clear. Jasmine didn't fight for pride. But she wasn't someone to push anymore. She let go of Kayla's wrist and walked away. Slow and steady, just like always. Behind her, Kayla stood frozen, her hands still raised, but her power gone. From that day, the bullies finally stopped, because now they understood. Jasmine wasn't just the quiet girl. She was something else, something unshakable, something powerful. And they were too late to realize it. By now, the school had stopped laughing at Jasmine. No one dared to trip her in the hallway. No one threw food or whispered insults anymore. Even the teachers had started looking at her differently, like they finally saw someone they had ignored too long. But Jasmine didn't want attention. She didn't want praise or fear. All she ever wanted was to be left alone and respected like anyone else. Still, her silence had become louder than words. The fight video, her false suspension. The moment she caught Kayla's wrist, all of it had turned Jasmine into a legend inside the school halls. And legends always attract attention. One day, during lunch, a group of students gathered around a table, whispering and pointing at their phones. Someone had uploaded the fight video again, this time with a dramatic title. Quiet Girl Destroys Opponent in One Hit, and added dramatic music in the background. It exploded online. More than just the school was watching now. Strangers were commenting, calling Jasmine a real-life warrior. Some even thought it was fake because she looked too calm to be that strong. By the end of the day, the video had been shared thousands of times, and Jasmine's name started trending in local groups. Jasmine found out about it when one of the teachers showed her a news article on their tablet. It said, "Teen Underground Fighter Shocks Internet," and had a blurry still image of her with gloves on, eyes locked in focus, hair tied back in. "A simple braid. You should be proud," the teacher said gently. "You're inspiring people." Jasmine just looked at the screen, then looked away. "That's not why I fight," she replied. She left school that day with her usual calm steps. But something inside her felt heavy. Fame wasn't what she wanted. She didn't like cameras. She didn't like being watched. It reminded her of the first day, except now. Instead of laughing, they were watching in awe, and to Jasmine, it still felt the same. That night at the gym, her uncle Marcus sat her down after training. "You need to think about what comes next," he said. "This attention isn't going away." "I didn't ask for it," Jasmine said, wiping sweat from her face. "I know," Marcus said, "but now that it's here, you have a choice. You can either run from it, or you can control it." Jasmine didn't answer right away. She looked around the gym, the dusty lights, the patched mats, the punching bags that had taken her pain for years. This place had made her strong, but the world outside didn't know that story. They only saw the knockouts. Later that week, something unexpected happened. A local boxing coach visited the school and asked to meet Jasmine. He had seen the video and recognized her uncle's old fighting style. "That girl has something rare," he said to the principal. "Not just talent, discipline, control, balance." When Jasmine met the coach after school, he was polite but serious. He handed her a card. "If you're ready for the real leagues, let me know," he said. "You could go far." Jasmine took the card but didn't say anything. She kept it in her pocket, quiet as always. A few days later, the school held an assembly. The principal called Jasmine up to the stage. She didn't want to go, but the whole gym was watching. Her feet moved slowly toward the front, her hands cold, her mind racing. The principal spoke kindly about her courage, her strength, and her example. Students clapped, some even stood up. Jasmine stood still, her face unreadable. Then the microphone was handed to her. She had never spoken in front of a crowd before. Her heart beat fast. Her palms were sweaty. But she looked up and saw everyone waiting quiet, respectful. Even the bullies had their eyes on her. She cleared her throat and said, "I didn't come here to fight anyone." Her voice was soft but clear. "I just wanted to learn, to grow, to be treated like everyone else." She paused, then added, "I never hit first, and I don't fight for fun. I fight because I know what it feels like to be hurt. And I don't want anyone else to feel that way." There was silence in the gym. Then the clapping began. Soft at first, then louder, stronger, until the whole room filled with the sound of hands coming together, not for a champion, but for a girl who stood quietly and never broke. After the assembly, several students came up to her. Some asked to take pictures. Others just said thank you. A few even cried. Jasmine smiled politely but didn't say much. Her words had already been said. That night, she sat with her uncle on the porch. the stars above them glowing softly. Marcus looked at her and said, "You handled that better than I ever could." Jasmine leaned back, resting her head on the... "Well, I didn't want to be known like this," she said. "But now you are," he replied. "And maybe someone out there, someone scared. Someone quiet is going to stand up because of you." Jasmine didn't answer. She just looked up at the sky. And for the first time in weeks, she felt a little lighter. She was still the same girl. But the world had changed around her, and she was ready for whatever came next. One evening, Jasmine left school a little later than usual. The sun had already begun to set, and the hallways were almost empty. She had stayed back to help organize books in the library, something she liked doing because it gave her peace, quiet, and space to think. As she stepped outside, she heard a voice call her name. She turned and saw 3 familiar faces: Kayla and her 2 closest friends. They stood by the bike racks, arms crossed, faces tense. Jasmine paused but didn't say anything. She kept walking toward them, calm and silent like always. Kayla stepped forward, her voice low and bitter. "You think you've won, don't you?" she said. "Just because people clap for you now." Jasmine looked at her, her eyes steady, her voice soft. "I didn't fight for applause." Kayla laughed, but it sounded forced. "Whatever. You act like you're some kind of hero, but you're just a freak who got lucky," one of the other girls muttered. "We should have taught her a lesson that first day." Jasmine raised an eyebrow slightly. "Taught me what?" "That I should stay quiet while being pushed around." There was a pause. Then Kayla's anger boiled over. She lunged forward and shoved Jasmine hard. Jasmine stumbled back, but didn't fall. She straightened her shoulders and stared at Kayla. "I'm not afraid of you," Kayla said, trying to sound strong. "I know," Jasmine replied. "But maybe you should be afraid of the part of you that hates peace." That moment, someone behind them gasped. It was a student walking by who had seen the whole thing. Then another joined, and soon a few more gathered. Phones out, recording. Kayla realized the situation was slipping again, just like last time. So she did the only thing she thought would end it. She raised her hand to slap Jasmine. But Jasmine moved faster. She didn't hit her. She just stepped forward and caught Kayla's wrist in the air. Firm but gentle. Then slowly pushed her arm back. "Down. I told you before," Jasmine said quietly. "You don't want to do that." Kayla's eyes widened again. But this time, she wasn't just shocked. She was scared, not of getting hit, but of knowing that Jasmine had every chance to crush her and didn't. That kind of control was power more. Students had gathered now. They were whispering, recording, and watching with wide eyes. Jasmine turned away from Kayla and walked off without another word. The crowd parted for her like water. No one said anything. They just watched her disappear. Down the sidewalk the next day, the video of the confrontation had already gone viral. The title read, "Bullies Tried Again." But the fighter only needed one move. It was everywhere. Even some news pages picked it up, calling Jasmine the quiet power in class. People looked at her with new eyes, not just impressed, but respectful. Even the teachers now used her name with admiration, but Jasmine stayed the same. She wore the same old shoes, the same patched bag, the same quiet smile. She still didn't talk much, didn't seek friends. But people started sitting near her, asking for help with homework, or just sitting quietly beside her. One day during gym class, the school coach approached Jasmine after seeing the video. "You've got discipline, control, and heart," he said. "How would you like to help us train the girls' boxing team?" Jasmine blinked in surprise. "Me? Train others?" "Yes," the coach nodded. "Not just your fist, your calm, your mind, your focus. That's what they need." Jasmine thought about it for a long moment, then said, "Okay, but I don't want it to be about fighting back. I want them to feel safe, strong, and in control of their life. Exactly, the coach said, smiling. That's why I asked you. The training sessions began quietly. Just 2 girls showed up the first week. Both of them shy. One of them had been bullied. Before 2, Jasmine didn't talk much during practice. She just demonstrated movements, explained breath control, and showed them how to hold their stance with confidence. Weeks passed and more girls started joining. Not to fight, but to learn strength and silence. Jasmine didn't just train them physically, she taught them something deeper. How to walk without fear. How to look people in the eye. How to say no without shouting. Meanwhile, Kayla changed too. After being humiliated twice, something inside her cracked. But instead of getting meaner, she grew quiet. One afternoon, she walked up to Jasmine after practice, her face pale, her voice trembling slightly. "I was wrong," she said. "I'm sorry." Jasmine looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "I know," she said. "I forgive you, but you need to forgive yourself too." Kayla's eyes welled with tears. She nodded and walked away. Something heavy lifted from her shoulders that night. Jasmine returned home and sat on the porch with her uncle. Like they always did, he handed her a small photo. It was of her mother, standing in a firefighter uniform, holding baby Jasmine in her arms. "She'd be proud," Marcus said softly. Jasmine looked at the picture, then at the stars. "I hope so," she whispered, because she hadn't just survived high school, she had transformed it, not with punches, but with patience, purpose, and peace. Weeks passed, and Jasmine's name was now spoken with both respect and care. She was no longer the quiet girl or the new girl. She had become something bigger, something unshakable. Students who once laughed now nodded politely when they saw her. Teachers treated her with admiration. Even the principal now greeted her personally whenever they crossed paths. But Jasmine had not changed for attention. She still sat in the same place in class, still wore the same shoes, still brought homemade lunch wrapped in foil. Her world was steady, peaceful, and private. The boxing training group had grown too. The gym had to open a second hour just to fit all the girls now joining. Many of them had never thrown a punch in their lives. Some were shy, some scared, but Jasmine never raised her voice, never made fun of anyone. She taught them how to move, how to breathe, and most of all, how to believe in themselves. One afternoon, during a quiet moment after practice, a girl named Tasha, who had once been picked on for her weight, asked Jasmine, "Why don't you ever show off? You're the strongest person here." Jasmine smiled softly and said, "Because real strength doesn't need to scream." The room fell quiet for a moment. Then Tasha whispered, "I wish I learned that sooner." Jasmine looked at her and replied, "You're learning now, and that's what matters." Outside the gym, however, a storm was growing. A new student had joined the school, a boy named Malik, tall, confident, with a sharp smile and fast words. He was known for trouble at his last school and had been expelled twice. Within days, he had already gathered a small group around him. Students who liked to break rules and mock others. Malik noticed Jasmine on the first day. He watched how everyone stepped aside when she passed, how teachers nodded, how students whispered her name. He didn't like it. "She's just a girl," he said loudly in the hallway one day. "What's the big deal?" One of the students replied, "She's a fighter, man. She knocked out a grown woman in a ring." Malik smirked. "Then I guess I need to see it for myself." Later that week, Malik showed up outside Jasmine's gym with 2 boys filming on their phones. He walked straight in, loud and cocky, interrupting the practice. "So this is where the legend trains," he said, looking around. "Looks smaller than I thought." Jasmine was holding pads for a younger student. She turned slowly, her eyes calm. "Can I help you?" she asked. "You can show me if all the hype is real," Malik said, stepping onto the mat. "Let's spar, you and me." The room froze. The girls looked scared. Some stepped back. Jasmine's uncle walked forward and said, This isn't that kind of place. Son, we don't fight for ego here. But Malik wasn't listening. Come on, Jasmine. Just one round, I won't go hard. Jasmine looked around at the younger girls, their eyes wide with worry. Then she nodded once. Okay, she said. One round, no strikes to the face. Malik grinned. Deal. They both stepped onto the mat, gloves on, people watching silently, cameras recording from the corners. Malik bounced on his feet, showing off, throwing flashy punches in the air. Jasmine simply stood, eyes locked, body still. The bell rang. Malik rushed forward with a fast jab. But Jasmine didn't move. She watched him, measured him, then stepped aside smoothly. Letting him miss by inches, he swung again, missed again. Her movement was clean, perfect, quiet. Then, with one move, she shifted her weight and struck his side with a clean body shot, not enough to hurt badly, but enough to make him lose his balance and drop to one knee. The room went silent. Malik gasped, sweat on his face. Pride shattered. He looked up at Jasmine, eyes wide with disbelief. She didn't gloat, didn't speak. She just stepped back and took off her gloves. That's enough, she said. Malik stood up slowly, shaking his head. You're crazy, he muttered, then walked out of the gym, his followers close behind, no longer recording. The next day, Jasmine's name was back online. This time with a new video, he challenged the quiet girl. And regretted it. Comments poured in, praising her calm, her skill, her humility. People wrote things like she's a master of discipline, and she's the kind of hero kids need. Jasmine didn't read the comments. She just kept training, teaching, and learning. But something else happened after that day. More boys started joining the class. Not to fight, but to learn. They saw Jasmine not as a threat, but as a teacher. Someone who could show them how to control their anger, their fear, their shame. One of the new boys said, I always thought power meant yelling, but she shows it. In silence, another girl added, she makes me feel like I can protect myself without becoming like the bullies at school. Jasmine was invited to speak in a special assembly about self-respect and strength. She stood in front of hundreds of students and said only a few words. Fighting is not what makes you strong, she said. Choosing not to when you can't? Real power. She stepped down from the stage and walked back to her seat. No music, no lights, just her quiet steps echoing across the hall, and the applause followed, not because she asked for it, but because she had earned it. The final month of school arrived, and everything had changed. Not just for Jasmine, but for the whole school. The building felt calmer, safer, more respectful. Students who once whispered insults now held doors open for others, even the quiet. Kids walked with their backs straighter. Jasmine had become more than a student, more than a fighter. She had become a symbol of silent strength, a role model without trying to be one. She still arrived early, walked the same halls, and sat in the same seat at the back of the class. She didn't wear anything flashy, never acted like a queen. But everyone knew who she was now and what she had been through. Her story had been shared across town and even reached a local news station. They sent a small team to interview her at the gym. The reporter was expecting someone bold, someone loud and confident. But when Jasmine entered the gym, sweaty from training, hair tied back, and face calm, they were surprised. You're the girl everyone's talking about, the reporter said. Jasmine looked at the camera and replied, softly, I'm just someone who didn't give up. The news clip was short, but it touched many hearts. Parents wrote letters to the school, thanking Jasmine for being an example to their kids. Other schools reached out asking if she could visit and talk to students about courage. Jasmine didn't like big crowds, but she agreed to a few visits. She didn't give long speeches, just a few quiet words, and those were enough. But there was one more surprise waiting. One day after gym practice, Jasmine's coach called her aside and handed her an envelope. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the paper, her hands shaking just a little. It was a scholarship letter from a top sports academy. They had seen her videos, read her story, and wanted her to train with them full-time, not just to fight, but to study, to grow, and maybe even represent them in national tournaments. Jasmine blinked at the letter, then looked up at her coach. "They want me?" She asked. "They need people like you," the coach said. "Not just fighters, but leaders." Jasmine nodded slowly, her heart full. She took the letter home and showed it to her uncle. Marcus sat in silence for a moment, then stood up and hugged her tight, his eyes misty. "She'd be so proud," he whispered. And Jasmine knew he was talking about her mother. The next week was her last at the school. She packed her books quietly, returned her locker key, and wrote small thank you notes to her favorite teachers. Not long letters, just simple words like, "Thank you for believing in me." On the final day, the school held a small goodbye ceremony for her. It wasn't fancy. Just students and teachers gathered in the gym, one by one. People stood up to say what Jasmine had meant to them. Tasha said, "She made me believe I was worth something." A boy from the basketball team said, "She showed us that being strong doesn't mean being loud." Even Kayla stood up and said, "I treated her badly, and she still showed me mercy." That's real strength. Jasmine didn't cry, but her chest felt heavy with emotion. When it was her turn to speak, she walked to the front slowly, looked around the gym, and said, "Thank you for giving me space to grow." She looked at the younger students and added, "Never be ashamed of being quiet. Just make sure your silence is full of purpose." Then she stepped down, and the room filled with applause. Not wild cheering, but the steady kind. It's the kind that means respect. That night, she sat on the porch. One last time, beside her uncle, a small suitcase beside her. The stars above were quiet and endless, just like her thoughts. "Are you scared?" Marcus asked. A little. Jasmine said honestly. "Good," he replied. "That means you're about to do something big." Jasmine smiled, her hands resting on her knees, the cool night wind brushing her cheeks. She remembered the first day she walked into the school, head down, heart full of pain, not knowing what would come, and now she was leaving not just as a student, but as a champion of something deeper than boxing. She had faced hate without returning. She had taken pain and turned it into strength. She had protected others even when no one protected her. And she had done it all without shouting, because her power was never in her voice. It was in her presence. The next morning, she boarded the bus to the academy, her eyes staring out the window as the city passed by. Her phone buzzed with messages from classmates, coaches, and even people she had never met, wishing her luck, calling her an inspiration. But Jasmine didn't read them right away. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "I'm still just getting started." And she was right, because Jasmine's story wasn't ending. It was only beginning, and the world hadn't seen the best of her yet.